Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films. Welcome to another odd video. Last couple of weeks I showed off my mediocre poetry. Today I'm going to show off another one of my passions, even though it's getting harder to be passionate about it anymore, and that's my jersey collection of the Oakland, Los Angeles, Oakland, Las Vegas Raiders. I got into the Raiders in 1985. I can't exactly remember why. Obviously the silver and black, the colours, greatest colours in professional sports. Obviously. But maybe because everybody hates them, they're seen as renegades, outlaws, led by their owner Al Davis, who sadly died in 2011, and his son took over, and we've pretty much been rudderless ever since. I am wearing the 80s starter jacket made famous by NWA, Ice Cube and the boys, and it still fits. I've probably had this for about 35 years. So I'm just going to go through the jerseys that I have. Strangely enough, I don't have jerseys of current players, even though maybe one day I'll fly over to Vegas, raid the Raider image shops, and come back with a Max Crosby and a Devontae Adams, maybe a Hunter Renfrow if we don't trade him as well, and some nice throwbacks. Seeing it's about the Raiders in the last 20 years have been abysmal, I might as well start with a symbol of that abysmality, which isn't even a word. One of the biggest busts in NFL history. It's Jamarcus Russell, number 2. He really should have worn number 1, shouldn't he have? The number 1 pick in the 2007 draft. Rocket arm quarterback, but unfortunately didn't actually give a monkeys, just wanted the money. One of the famous stories about Jamarcus Russell is told by somebody else that I've got a jersey of, a teammate, who the coaching staff gave him a blank DVD to take home and said, go study the film on our next opponent and the group of plays we've put on this DVD. And Jamarcus did, and he came back to the facility and said, oh yeah, those plays are really good, coach, really liked those plays. And of course the DVD was blank, so he never even looked at it. He was pretty much out of the league quite quickly, but in those days rookie contracts were guaranteed, so it pretty much set the organisation back 5 years. Now obviously everybody likes to dump on us for having terrible drafts, and that is certainly fair over the last 20 years. But Jamarcus Russell would have went in the top 10 because of his physical skills. He just would have. It was a poor quarterback class. I mean, Brady Quinn was the second best quarterback, and he went, I think, in the top 10 as well to Cleveland. So Jamarcus Russell is just a sad chapter, but in those days, as a fan, I still had some hope. So I've actually got a home and an away jersey of Jamarcus Russell. I'm not sure how much you would actually get if you sold it. Probably not a lot. Next in comparison, a Rich Gannon, number 12. Obviously we've had a couple of famous number 12s, and Rich Gannon is the best quarterback we've had since the other number 12. Yes, I know lots of people will go, oh, but Derek Carr's better, despite having never won anything. But Rich Gannon, his career from 1999 to 2002 is a classic Raider reclamation project. Originally drafted by the Patriots as just an athlete. He went to Minnesota, went to Kansas City. Ugh, disgusting. But came to the Raiders as a free agent. Nobody really knew who he was in '99. Obviously, this was the early days of the internet. I only had dial-up in 1998. But all he did was hold people accountable. And between Gannon and Carr, we just had a myriad of terrible quarterbacks. And I know there's certain Raider fans who hate Rich Gannon because he threw 5 picks in the Super Bowl loss in 2003. But he's the reason we got to the Super Bowl, plus the Bucks knew every single play we were running in offense. So it's amazing he didn't throw 10 picks. Tough as nails, pound for pound, he summed up what it is to be a Raider. No offence to Derek Carr, but Derek Carr cannot hold Rich Gannon's jock. But let's not get into the cult of Carr. Next, another quarterback who I loved, Jeff Hostetler, number 15, who sadly only played for 4 years for us between 93 and 96. We made the playoffs once in his 4 years, lost in a last game decider to get into the playoffs to the Chiefs. Ugh, disgusting. Otherwise we would have made it 2 out of the 4 years. In 1995 we started 8-2 when we moved back to Oakland. Should have made the playoffs that year, but then Hostetler got hurt again and we lost the last 6 and finished 8-8. So he really should have made the playoffs 3 out of the 4 years he was the Raider quarterback. Again, tough guy, came from the Giants, took over from Phil Simms and won Super Bowl 25 over the Bills. Tough as nails. I mean, the beating he took, because in those days it was we were still in the drop back 7 steps, hang on to the ball, get creamed and throw it deep offense, which is obviously not that sophisticated. I mean, one of the injuries was against Denver. Dave Wyman hit him across the throat and damaged his larynx or his trachea, and it's tough as nails. Unfortunately, got hurt a little bit too much with us, but he took an absolute beating for 4 years and kept getting back up again. Next is probably a player who's famous for playing for somebody else, but I consider him a Raider. It's number 80, and it's Jerry Rice. Now, he may be more famous for playing with the 49ers, disgusting, but he had 2 really good years with us, so that means he's actually a Raider. The same with Ronnie Lott, the safety, who's obviously more famous for playing with the 49ers, disgusting. But he had 1 good year where he had 8 interceptions, so he's actually a Raider. Eric Dickerson will always be a Ram because he had not a great year with us in 1992, so he's a Ram. Next is linebacker Kurt Morrison, who's the one that tells that famous and hilarious Jamarcus Russell story. Not the greatest linebacker in the world, but when you consider the Raider linebackers in the last 20 years, he's actually might be the best linebacker we've ever had in the last 20 years. Lovely guy, works in media, sometimes stands in the Rich Eisen show. Classy guy, good kid. That's why I have his jersey, obviously. Next is the legendary Howie Long. Defensive end, defensive tackle, defensive lineman. He moved around the line of scrimmage before Reggie White did. Hall of Fame player, but was always humble. He could still give us 20 snaps. He did go into acting. He was in John Woo's Broken Arrow. Acting didn't go that great. But he works for Fox every Sunday. Still looks as though he could give us 20 plays, just in pass rushing downs. But unfortunately, Al Davis, who was the smartest guy in the room for decades, as the game changed in the 80s with the West Coast offence, Al Davis kept thinking he was the smartest guy in the room, but not necessarily was. And he started drafting. You know, he was always fell in love with physical traits, big, strong, fast. But he would also draft players who reminded him of Raider greats, and he fell into that trap after Howie Long. He kept drafting white defensive ends who had good motors, thinking that eventually one of them will turn into Howie Long. But Howie Long was just your classic small school guy, overachiever, but turned into one of the best defensive players of all time. Next, we've had a lot of great 24s. This is Marshawn Lynch. Again, more famous for playing in Seattle, but he is from Oakland, and gave us a couple of entertaining years. So Marshawn Lynch is really a Raider, even though he's more famous for playing for the Seahawks, which is fairly disgusting. Another 52, I'll try and hold this one up without crying. Khalil Mack, drafted in 2014, and then when John Gruden came back, he traded him. It's like the best defensive player we've had, arguably in the last 20 years, and we traded him. And of course we blew those first round picks on not very good players instead of just giving Khalil Mack some money. Yes, you could argue the defence wasn't that good with him, so it wouldn't make that much difference without him, but he was actually a playmaker, and with the exception of Max Crosby, we don't have any playmakers in defence. To rub salt in the wound, Mac came back last year to play for the Chargers. Disgusting. It's not right. Next, somebody could be Mr. Raider. That is, of course, 00 Jim Otto. This is a 1974 throwback jersey. Jim Otto, who gave everything for the Raiders, including both legs. I think he's a double amputee now. He's certainly a single amputee at least. Tough as nails. You know, those old pictures of the single face mask that he would wear, blood coming down his face. That's Raider football. Those days that we intimidated teams just when we came off the bus. I say we because I was obviously hiding at the back of the bus. Then the greatest number 12 in Raider history, Ken the Snake Stabler. I won't go into how obscene it was that the Hall of Fame waited until he died before voting him in. They did the same stuff to Cliff Branch, which is truly disgusting. What can you say about the Snake? The greatest left-handed quarterback of all time. Sorry, it's not Steve Young. Disgusting. It's the Snake. More swagger than Joe Namath. More accurate than Kenny Anderson. Next, this is a jersey that's pretty much a Howie Long jersey, even though it just says Raiders in the back. I've probably had this for at least 35 years. Next, not a great player, but just a great kid. Number 89 in the mid-2000s is Ronald Curry, who started out as a quarterback in North Carolina, number one high school player in the Carolinas, I believe. Converted to wide receiver for us. Go check out the 2004 Sunday night game between the Raiders and Broncos in the snow at Mile High. Disgusting. He makes a wonderful one-handed catch as he's turning round and going down. Ronald Curry didn't have a great career, but he was a wonderful human being. He's in coaching now. Arguably my favourite Raider because I watched his entire career, and that is of course Tim Brown, Hall of Famer, who never gets the credit he deserves because he played with some bad quarterbacks. I mean, really bad quarterbacks. Rusty Hilger, Marcus Tuisasopo, Jace Rader, let's be honest. Tim Brown, class, and he didn't wear gloves after 1993, unlike these guys now who wear Teflon stick-on gloves. Next, one of the all-time greats, another Raider Hall of Famer who started with the Packers and the Colts, but found his home on the island of misfit toys that is the Raiders. Ted Hendricks, kick him in the head, Ted, or the Mad Stork, because he was like 6'7". I think he still holds the record for the number of blocked kicks. Mad as a gooseberry, but such a hard worker, such a talent, and such a wonderful guy. And unlike quite a lot of Raider legends, he's still with us at the recording of this video. We've got a Tim Brown away jersey. Then we've got another classic Raider reclamation project. It's Tyrone Wheatley, who was a first round pick of the Giants. That didn't really pan out in New York. Came to us and formed part of Thunder and Lightning with little Napoleon Kaufman, who sadly retired early to become a pastor. Disgusting. Tyrone Wheatley, his signature run against the Chiefs in the last game, disgusting, in the last game of the 1999 season, which pretty much gave Gruden another season, which would become 2000. We actually went 12-4 and went to the championship game, as he broke about 10 Chiefs tackles. Disgusting. He's now in coaching as well. And again, just to show what a hopeful person I was back in the day, a Jamarcus Russell home jersey. Terrible, terrible, terrible person. And pick. And player. Next, another one of the great 24s. It's Sir Charles Woodson. I really need to get the other classic 24, which is of course Old Man Willie Brown. But Charles Woodson had a wonderful career with us, then got bogged down in injuries and contracts, went to the Packers, revitalised his career as a safety, came back to the Raiders in his last couple of years, provided leadership and a spark. We still couldn't win anything, but Charles Woodson, he now makes wine and he's wonderful. Speaking of wonderful, it's the molester. You can't really say that anymore, but it's Lester the molester, Lester the interceptor, the judge, Lester Hayes, who should be in the Hall of Fame, but because of his sticky hands with Stickum, that seems to be held against him. He did have 13 interceptions one year, but then if you look at, as I said, players now, wide receivers with their really sticky gloves, I mean, what's the difference between their sticky gloves and Stickum that Lester used? Overcame a stutter in his career, really shy guy, but that Lester Hayes crouch as he manhandled receivers all the way down the field, that's poetry, and obviously formed the greatest cornerback duo with Mike Haynes, Haynes and Hayes. I mean, we had Willie Brown and Skip Thomas, Dr. Death. We had Haynes and Hayes. We had Lionel Washington and Terry McDaniel. We had Charles Woodson and Eric Allen. And it's ironic, again, in the last 20 years, with the exception of somebody's jersey I have, our corners have been pretty much terrible. Disgusting. Next, a comet that you only see once every 300 years. perhaps the greatest athlete who's ever lived. You know the number, you know the name. It's Bo Jackson. He only came to us in half a season. The Bucks drafted him number 1 overall. He told them he was never going to play for them. He never did. He re-entered the draft, and Al Davis, being Al Davis, spent a 7th round pick on him just as a flyer, and then told him, you could play baseball, you can play football for half a season. Sadly, one of the greatest tragedies in sporting history, he only played from 87 to 90, and then in the 90 playoffs had that horrendous injury of his hip that led to the blood vessels in his hip being necrotic, and he ended up getting a hip replacement and actually playing baseball again, but he would never play football again. I'm still not over it. I don't think any Raider fan is ever over the Bo Jackson injury. Go check out the 1987 Monday night game against Seattle in the Kingdome. That never gets old. Another legend, number 87, Dave Casper, goes to the post, another Hall of Famer. Again, we have a strong lineage of tight ends. Dave Casper, Raymond Chester, Todd Christensen, R.I.P. Todd Christensen should be in the Hall of Fame, I'm sorry. Ethan Horton, Darren Waller, who we traded in the off-season. Why? Well, I know, he was expensive and he's getting old. But Dave Casper goes to the post. And then number 21, an example of how to be patient. This is Nnamdi Asomugha, who, when he was drafted in the first round, the commissioner didn't even get his name right. Nnamdi was the definition of a shutdown corner in the years of 2006, in the mid-aughts, when we were absolutely awful. Nnamdi was the bright shining star. And then when he left to go to Philadelphia, and Philadelphia asked him to do more zone coverage and zone principles, he was awful. It was as if he almost forgot how to play the position. He was a man corner, and he was poetry in motion. He was lengthy, he had good length, he had good bubble, he had nice fluidity in his hips. But then when he was asked to defend in space and zone principles, he was just a disaster. And then he bounced about, and his career kind of fizzled out despite looking like a Hall of Famer for the first... Well, that's the thing, because when he came in, he didn't really develop until year 3. So for the first couple of years, we were kind of criticised for drafting him because he was kind of raw and he never really developed. And then year 3, a switch came on and he just became a shutdown corner. We love Nnamdi. Again, if you've got a home Bo Jackson, you might as well have an away Bo Jackson jersey. And then I have another Ken Stabler throwback. This is 67-76. Lovely big warm Ken Stabler throwback. And then another Hall of Fame legend, number 25, Freddie B. Freddie Biletnikoff. Again, he used to vomit before games, smoke a cigarette, and then go out and make the Hall of Fame, as Ken Stabler said. Oh, Kenny B, MVP of Super Bowl 11. And a legend. And then finally, number 72, offensive tackle, Lincoln Kennedy, who still works for the Raiders media. Just a mountain of a man, and really rock solid again in that wonderful period of 1999 to 2002 where we actually won games and we actually expected to win games. You know, the way it was in the mists of time before the game passed us by. Hopefully one day it might come back to the glory days. but my faith in that is very, 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 very low. As I say every year, we're 4 players away from being 4 players away. But we'll see what happens in 2023. I'm sure it'll be a wonderful and enjoyable ride. So thanks very much for watching another odd and very niche video. And hopefully you'll join me again. Sorry, I'm just thinking about Bo Jackson again. Thanks very much for watching. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell